Ba-ra-pa-bum-bum.
Let me know if you can hear. Do you hear this?
Hello, I'm Katie Lonke. You're listening to the Bills Shop Society podcast.
Yeah.
I just heard a snippet of it in the background. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, no, you're just hearing. You're hearing that from probably from my headphones.
Right. Yeah, probably.
Which is odd, but I don't understand why sometimes you hear it and sometimes you don't. I didn't do anything.
It's like Mounds bars, you know?
Yeah, I didn't do anything different from what we usually do, but I guess that's technology. How you doing, Danny?
Good, Joe. How are you? Sorry for the runaround. I had a weirdly busy day and evening, but
yeah,
sorry for that. I kept texting you like 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes.
No, it's all right. I was playing around with our board here and just trying some different things. That's probably why I messed up our settings somehow. But no.
I appreciate your patience there. But yeah, how are you, man? How are things? How's everything going on the south side?
Good, man. Good. Just enjoying a little bit slower pace at the shop, and being able to just pick up and clean, and excited about sorting different screws and nuts and pieces of just random bicycle parts that honestly I haven't been able to tend to in over in a couple of years. Usually that's a task that you do in the wintertime or when things slow down around the shop, and things haven't been.
Yeah.
That's on the repair side and the just the bike shop as a whole. There hasn't been a lot of like enjoyable downtime. Like the downtime that we needed over the last couple of years was just actual downtime. Like get out and clear your head kind of downtime. And this is like the kind of downtime where you hang out and sort and clean and enjoy what you're doing around the shop, So it's good. It's good. I'm kind of excited to start organizing and redoing the shop. So
nice. Are you doing anything fancy or just kind of like a general reorg, like organize and clean up?
No, I guess we're starting with an organizing and cleaning up just to kind of see what we have. But it's going to be a redo of the shop. It's going to be, painting and reorganizing, redoing the retail space and redoing the repair shop. It should be. It'll be a pretty thorough makeover of the shop. So but you got to start by organizing and figuring out what we got first, So, we also took in some things from Cycle Smithy, bike shop I used to work at. They went out of business, so we've kind of absorbed a few things from there, and so trying to find and make room for that stuff as well. So the last couple of years in the bike business is kind of, I think most bike shops have been kind of boiled down to their essence, and kind of figured out what they do and what they do well, what matters, what doesn't matter to them. And so we're coming out of the last couple of years with a real kind of clear path to what we want to do in the future, retail wise and repair wise. So yeah, it's good.
Nice.
Yeah, check us out. So yeah, and also just that we've got a couple of people trained, and some new people that we took on. So getting them up to speed and getting them to partake in the process of like redoing things, making things a little friendlier for them and giving them some tools to work a little easier at the shop. So yeah, it's good.
Nice.
Yeah.
It must be kind of nice. I'm not a small business owner, but it must be nice to just have a little breather and just a little time to, kind of sit back just a little bit and be like, okay, another year of the pandemic and the craziness of like stock and customers and service and pressure to do this, that, and the other. And just to kind of like, all right, let's absorb and think about all that went on and what we might want to do differently, and just kind of like,
Exhale.
have some, let those creative juices flow a little bit and not feel that pressure of like, where's my bike?
Yeah. Exhale a little bit, and that it really has been like, where's my bike? Where are my bike parts? Where am I? That's been 2 solid years of that.
You said I would have this bike on Monday.
Even during the off season, just trying to find things and look for things, and not that we're nowhere near back to normal, just being able to order things, but it's gotten much better. It's like, it's not at the point where you have to snipe things in the middle of the night or wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning because there are computer system updates at that hour and you want to be the first one in line, and and at some point we're going to get back to the point where we can actually build a bike that a custom bike that we want for someone. It's, it seems like such a special thing, something that we used to do pretty regularly. We haven't been able to do for 2 or 3 years. That thought of like handpicking the parts and grips and the handlebar and the frame, that kind of thing has been
the old days, Joe.
Yeah, that hasn't existed in the it's been very difficult. It's not that it hasn't existed at all, but it's been very difficult to do in the bike world for the last couple of years. And it's like that's really what we're I'm kind of missing a lot of, and I realize that now that that's something that I really missed, just and something that we really want to focus on moving forward.
The Brits have that beautiful word, bespoke.
Yeah.
Which in our language over here, Joe, we just say custom. But bespoke has the beautiful pun, of course, for cyclists.
Yep.
It just sounds nicer. Bespoke.
Yeah.
It's so funny. You can't get jack shit these days custom on your bike. If you go to buy like a mass-produced bike, like for example, I bought a Trek Domane.
Yep.
And it was a 58. I know we talked about this previously, but it's a 58, and every single bike I've ever owned, except for 1 or 2, has been a 58. Every test bike, loan bike, review bike, etc., has always been a 58. Every single 58 bike I've ever ridden, except for, again, those 1 or 2 where I rode like a 57 or a whatever, had 172.5 cranks. For some weird reason, I cannot figure out to this day. I've had this bike almost a year. Trek decided with their 58 Domane, they're going to have 175 cranks. And I didn't understand that because I've ridden the Amanda, I've ridden the Madone, I've ridden a lot of Treks, high end, low end, mid range, what have you, and they're all like 172.5. For some reason, they put 175s, and it's like this thing that's gotten into my head where I'm always kind of like, could I be faster? Is that little tweak in my knee? Is that because of the longer crank? Like whatever. I'm not like overanalyzing it actually. Like I just ride my damn bike, but my point is like, even that, because I asked Trek like a couple of times. I called their corporate and then I asked the local shop. I'm like, hey, so love this bike. It's amazing. But, I've been riding 172.5 for like 30 plus years. So I hate to switch to 175s. And I also have slightly shorter legs than like my torso. My upper body's a little bit longer. So I'm just kind of like mindful of those things. And they're like, no, sorry, you have to buy new cranks. So I was like, all right, I'll bite the bullet. Just order me some new cranks. Like, oh, cool. Yeah. So they'll be available in April. And this was like months ago. I asked. So literally in a supply chain, pandemic, etc. So anyway, my point is like, we're so far removed from custom. Like that's obviously like a mass produced like shop bike, but just reminds me back in the day, because you go in, right? And we've talked about this. It's like, okay, I'll take that Merlin. I'll take that Aegeus, 58 centimeter. I want, give me Altegra. I want the shifters. I want, give me some Mavic wheels, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know, those seem like glorious good old days.
Yeah, I mean,
you get the bespoke bike.
It wasn't that long ago that you could do that. And, I mean, it was only 3 years ago, 4 years ago, but it seems like forever.
Mhm.
And and going back to your bike with those cranks, I wouldn't be surprised if that bike, if they put those cranks on there because they didn't have any other choice but to put 175s on there to
Yes.
finish the bike. I mean,
Yes.
I know that that has happened where they've subbed out parts, that they didn't intend for a certain bicycle, and and just because
Dirty little trick.
yeah, they had to get it out. They had to get it out the door. I was told that by a couple of different bike reps
Okay.
that they're
Interesting.
and if you look closely, I think on a lot of the I don't know if it's as prevalent now, but definitely over the last year, if you looked at bike spec on manufacturers' websites, oftentimes you would see drawings instead of pictures of the actual bike. And in small print, you would see, the right to sub parts out, or this is not the final list. I mean, they were
This
making.
is an artist's rendering.
Yeah. I mean,
It could be different.
It could be different. It could look a little bit different. Yeah, I mean, there were all sorts of asterisks and annotations on the manufacturer's website. So, I mean, I think they have a little bit. They're starting to get a little bit better idea of things now, but it's still.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a kind of creeping suspicion that might be the case, and who knows? I'm not charging Trek with the malfeasance here, but I don't mind if it's like they did a little weird thing with the stem or this or the seat. I don't know, just whatever. But the cranks are kind of like key, because pedaling is like something you do 100 times a minute. And you do it 1 million times a year or something, whatever. It's like, for me, that's like huge. Like, I can't imagine sacrificing. If I'm going to sacrifice one thing, it's not going to be the crank length. Like, I want my crank length to be right. I'd rather ride a 57 than a 58. Anyway. So there you go. The old days, bespoke. But so what's the daily, give the listeners, if they walk in your shop right now, what's going on? Is it just you during the weekday, and then you still have your little elves on weekends, or what's going on?
Yeah, right now it's down to me. I'm just I'm a lone ranger at the bike shop right now, and then weekends I have a little bit of help as I try to kind of rebuild the team. It's another reason I'm looking forward to the off season, because I hope to score some mechanics, and if there are any good mechanics out there, good people who are actually working in the bike business, they're tied up during the season. If they were kind of ethical guys, they weren't ditching anybody during the middle. They weren't leaving their bike shop to come and work for another bike shop in the middle of the year, unless something really bad happened. And so the good mechanics that I know who are out there and maybe a possibility for working to work for me next year were tied up. They were working in bike shops. I'm looking for people who really know what they're doing, and so I'm that's another thing I'm prepping for, is just to hopefully interview a few guys, or try to talk to these guys and see where they stand for next season. See if we can get them to come over and work for us. It's been pretty chilly here, as you know. The last week it's gotten down to 40s.
What the hell was that? It's 50s. Like all of a sudden it was in the 30s. It was like I was looking at the my app like multiple times a day because I want to go out and ride. It's like, I don't mind riding in the cold, full disclosure, and I actually enjoy it, but it went from like 75 to 35 in like a day. And I'm like, what the frick?
Yeah, you're just not mentally prepared for it. It would.
I'm not. I mean, you're right. It's mental.
They'd be beautiful winter days, but it's the fall. Like the leaves are still on the wall, on the trees, and so to go into the 30s and 40s at this time of the year was a little much.
Yeah. Welcome to Chicago. You're 100% right. If we had that. Today's October 20. If we had a November 20, December 20, I'd be like, no sweat. This is balmy. I love it. I'm in like Florida in my golf shorts. Let's go out. I got the knickers on. I got the balaclava. But like, it was gorgeous for like a long time, and we got really lucky. And then all of a sudden, it's like, all right, here's 32. What you gonna do, bitch?
Yeah,
and now it's going to be, of course, 70s the next like 3-4 days. So
yeah, it's supposed
welcome to Chicago.
Yeah, it's supposed to get nice again, and we should have a busy weekend coming up. But yeah, I mean, it's a reminder of what's coming, for us, and so trying to get all those outdoor projects, all that stuff, move things around and in storage, anything that needs to take place outdoors. I'm trying to get all that stuff done now. So.
Winter is coming, as the kids say, who are fans of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Our listeners, Joe, you are giving them the inside report, what it's like to be a bike shop owner,
mm-hmm.
mid to late pandemic, what it's like going into winter, Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest bike markets in the country, I presume, and your triumphs, your challenges.
Yeah,
and I think this is good content right here.
I hope so. I mean, and also an insight into, the big bike era, right? That we're back into. We were talking about it and kind of jokingly about big bike, but it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Trek and Specialized are buying up. I was just looking at one of the industry, magazines or websites, and every week they're Specialized or Trek are buying up a chain of 4 or 5 bike shops in some area, Michigan.
It's nuts. It's nuts.
Every week.
You can't keep up. You need an Excel sheet shared with the public, and everyone add to it, like crowdsource it. It is nuts. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
Nuts.
It really is crazy, and you'll have and so you have like the Trek and Specialized are buying up these shops, and then you have regional players like we have Wheel and Sprocket here in the Midwest, Wheel and Sprocket used to be like a Wisconsin-based bike shop. That's how I always knew them, and then they started drifting into the Chicagoland area, and they've been buying.
Yeah, it's where I got my bike.
Yeah, and so they now they're buying up bikes. They're buying bike shops. So you have.
So wait, are they the David and Goliath story?
No.
Are they the David and Trek is the Goliath, or what's going on?
I think that it feels like these companies are positioning themselves to get bought out by the Treks and the Specialized. Because I don't think that they're. I think Trek and Specialized are. From what I can see, they're buying really big shops in small, like rural areas.
Interesting.
So, like,
this is like Google buying the local little Silicon Valley startup.
Mm-hmm. And then they're buying up like regional chains, places that have 3 and 4 or 5 bike shops, and so they're buying those places up, and they're buying up like strong, one shop, single owner bike shops, but with very little competition. Like a standalone store in the middle of Iowa or something.
Right.
And but as this continues to happen, and I don't see any stop to it, you're going to have these you're going to have these factory stores, and then you're going to have these big regional chains, and then you're going to have us, which are like the bike shop of old, where the owners in the shop, and you have multiple brands in there, and you do a little bit of everything.
I mean, tell me what you think, but it sounds like in a weird way, this is like a great opportunity for small shops like you, because you can really bring in your expertise, your experience, and be like, hey, yeah, if you just need to buy like a $1,200 road bike, there you go. You can buy it from one of those shops. But if you want a bike that you might love and want to ride more and have for 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Oh, and you also want to get like a really good fit on it. And I can show you this, that. I'll spend time with you. Like we'll develop a relationship, which has been a theme of the show too. It's about that relationship. You don't get that all the time. Maybe you get it sometimes from big chains. I'm not saying, I wouldn't say you can't. But I would say generally when you go to a smaller shop, if it's a really good shop and they have know-how, and obviously you do, that's kind of priceless in my mind. That's invaluable.
Yeah, and we also don't need to sell it. We don't have the overhead that requires us to sell 10,000 bikes. We can be okay selling a handful of custom bikes a month, and and the other things that we do, and so we can take that time to together a bicycle for someone, send it out and get custom painted and talk to the painter and make sure everything gets done right. And it eats up a lot of time doing that, and I don't see where those big shops are gonna have an interest in doing that, where it's cost efficient for them to do that. Two, have the people that know how to do that. Maybe the manager of the store knows all the ins and outs of building a bike like that, but I find that a lot of those shops, those big shops, just require they have salespeople. They give them a weekend course on how to sell bikes and ring them up, and they could be selling that. They could be selling skis. They could be selling whatever, in 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
They're not really cyclists per se. They're just salespeople at that point. So, I'm actually looking forward to our new reality out there, when it comes to that kind of stuff, because I think we finally get to go back to doing what we're good at. So, focus on what we're good at versus a lot of stuff that we've been having to do for the last few years, in the last decade or two. The bike industry has been, we've been kind of all over the place trying to do whatever you can just to stay alive. And now there's I think we talked about it before, some definition. There's some real clear lines, what you are and what you aren't. And as those as Trek and Specialized continue to buy up stores, those places are going to look more and more corporate. They're going to take on a real look and feel that's different from the traditional bike shop. So.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, and we meander. We go in these different directions, and I think we're all trying to figure it out, like everybody else. It's interesting to me because if you sit back and just think about it, what's the situation going to be in 5-10 years? It's like, is it going to be even fewer indie shops, mom and pop, small shops? Sounds like it's on pace to do that. Is it going to be more and more just like Trek Specialized, like that chasm, like that, the difference between like the smaller shops and the big shops, big bike, is it just going to grow more and more like crazy? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard because I think, I know some young kids that are opening their own bike shop right now. They're in the process of building and opening a shop.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, they're going to do repairs, and they don't have a bike brand right now, and they're going to their focus is in selling bikes right now. They don't have the money to bring in a bunch of inventory, so they're going to start the traditional way, doing repairs and selling accessories, and and I think that's the that, but they're also mechanically they're mechanics. So I think that is kind of key for anyone who's opening a bike shop these days, or wants to open a 1-man or 2-person bike shop, is that somebody's going to be a strong mechanic.
Well, again, I'm not telling you anything new, but I can't imagine being a bike shop owner. It's a lot of things. Talk about wearing many hats. You're basically an expert in bikes, selling bikes, working on bikes, bike industry, yada yada, but also being a small business owner, and there are so many things going on. So it's kind of daunting in a way. I give people great credit, to be courageous to go out and be like, I'm going to start a bike shop. But one detail I wanted to ask you about, Joe, if I understood what you were saying. So let's say you're a young person and you're starting a bike shop. Do you have to decide, is the reality you have to decide, all right, what kind of shop are you going to be? Are you going to be a Trek shop, a Giant shop, Specialized, whatever the brand is? Do you have to kind of decide up front, where you're going to go? How does that work? Can you just be I want to be agnostic. I want to sell everything. What's the reality of that? I'm curious.
when I started the shop almost 15 years ago, I did have a few more options, I guess, than I do now. Like if I were starting a shop today versus 15 years ago, I think the realities are very different. I actually spoke to Specialized before I opened my shop, and I was too small. I was too small. I was a little small for them, but there was also a competing dealer not too far away. So there were some, but if that other dealer wasn't there, I think I would have been, I probably would have been a Specialized dealer. But sometimes things work out for the best, because had I committed to being a Specialized dealer, I would not have had anything else in the store. I might,
Oh, really?
Oh,
like
yeah.
You couldn't have Surly or whatever?
It would have been very difficult because I didn't have the money to do that. You can be a store that does a lot of different brands, or, a handful of brands. I think doing Specialized or Trek, once you do one of those big brands, you're either one or the other when it comes to one of those. But if you have enough money and enough capital, you can bring in all the brands you want.
Gotcha.
You can bring in, just say you want a couple of high-end brands like Yeti or
invasive species.
Yeah, Colnago, or you wanted Surly and Salsa. I think you could do it if you have a lot of money. There are shops that are able to do.
So there's no there's no martial law. Like no one's going to come on and be like, you can't do that. Like it's literally how much capital or reserve you got.
Yeah. There
do people come muscle you? Like, do goons come muscle you in the alley? Like, hey.
Yeah, some of it obviously has to do with competing with dealerships in the area. So
sure,
a good company won't open you if you are too close to another dealer. And there's some brands that are great about it. Some brands give you a pretty wide territory, meaning the circumference around your store, the miles around your store, you're it. There are other brands that are, pretty loose about that. They'll open people down the block. So it really depends on the brands that you're working with.
Sure.
So yeah, but a lot of it will come down to money, because if you're big enough and you're buying enough, I've seen bike companies that have no problem shutting somebody else down because somebody else is going to make a bigger commitment to the brand. So,
ouch.
Yeah.
Inside the bike shop industry, right here on the Bike Shop Society podcast. Joe, how can folks get in touch if they wanted to?
If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at mail@bikeshopsociety.com. If you're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you can look us up at Bike Shop Society. That's it. Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Now, back to the show. Goodbye.
Do you have any recent interactions? Because we had Cyclegator. It looked like he engaged with us on the socials a little bit, which was cool.
Yeah. He actually made a donation to KEXP, the public radio station out in Seattle, in the name of Bike Shop Society this week.
Dude, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been listening to it more and more.
Mm-hmm.
I've been telling my Googles and my Alexas, I have these various devices around the house here to play it. And I've been digging it. It's good, man. It's it's up there with my WLEW Chicago and Chirp. And then I listen to WNYC for news in the morning with Brian Lair and all these folks. And of course, WBEZ, the local stuff. I don't know, there's so many great stations, but for music, that's a good one, man. So he made a donation. That's really cool.
Yeah, they're doing a little bit of fundraising this week. You know how the public radio stations will do that.
Tis the season.
Mm-hmm.
Tis the season.
Thank you to him, and hope to have him on the show soon as a kind of a correspondent from Seattle. Get that Seattle perspective coming in. That would be great.
That would
a strong,
that would be so cool.
A cycling stronghold. Seattle. When you think about bikes, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. LA is starting to explode, as far as like their bike scene there is, I don't know that you automatically think about Los Angeles as this cycling mecca, but they got a cool scene, going there. They have
a very cool scene.
Yeah.
the Radivis, right? John Watson, aka John Prawley. It's one of those things like if you know, it's a somewhat niche site, but he's grown it really well. Long story short, John Watson is the guy behind the Radivist, and he's done really amazing things with that site and that brand. So he's grown it big time. I think he has collabs now with Pro's Closet. He does reportage, and they kind of integrate. I don't know if it's sponsored content. It looks like sponsored content. I'm not sure. I don't mean that in a bad way, but like in a good way. But he used to be known as John Prawley, and his site was Prawley is not probably. And he was like hot Joe into the early fixie frenzy in New York City. He lived in Brooklyn, I believe. I knew him when I lived in Brooklyn a little bit, and and then he went to like LA, and now I believe he's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He was also in Austin for quite a spell. He's moved around, and he's kind of just this amazing photographer, but like huge into bikes, does like all this stuff, and he has like these what are those like Jeeps? They have like, they're kind of iconic. They're like the desert roaming
like
Jeeps.
A Land
those?
Rover, or
like a Land Rover. Yes, that's it. Like a Land Rover. I don't know if that's the brand or the Toyota version of that or whatever those are, but he's really into those. Anyway, he has a whole like world. It's like the John Watson Radiv's world, and he does like crazy stuff. So, but my point is like he's made like a whole career out of this, and good for him. He's the hardest working guy in cycling, a lot of people say. I remember back in the day, I would go to NABS, the handmade bike show, and people like would walk around, do some stuff, and I was a journalist there with Bicycling Magazine at the time, and then I went independently a couple of times. People hobnobbing. Oh, Handy Hempson, like, hey, how's it going? Shake a hand. Can I have your autograph? Like, hey, tell me about that time you rode like in the Giro in the snow. It's like just like all this stuff, and you meet these like local builders, hobnobbing. You grab a beer, grab a taco, whatever, and there's John Watson working his ass off, taking a million photos, taking bikes, doing everything. So he was always the hardest working guy behind the scenes, and he's made this cool thing for himself, which it's kind of cool to see someone do it. He might be the OG like creator. Nowadays we see, creator thrown around everywhere, like I'm an Instagram creator, I'm a YouTube creator, whatever. He's kind of like one of the purest versions of that in my mind, because he came from like New York City fixie scene. People just doing like weird jumps under like viaducts, skate parks, that sort of thing. And he has, you can go back in the Wayback Machine and you can see his early blogs, and they were pretty fun and real, like just like basic and like street, but like cool. And anyway, he grew it like crazy. And I actually have a point in this story. So fasten your seatbelt. So then, like, fast forward, he like went to all these places and lived in all these places, and he kept growing his community, and like people are now contributing, and they have like, if you go to a site, it's beautiful. Some of the best photography you'll see in cycling. But one of his hashtags, and I don't know if it was his or someone else's, or he just like, used it, but it was LA sucks for cycling. And it's used ironically because he would show these insane like paths, mountain biking, cyclocross, single track, whatever, road, etc. And he would have all these great routes. And if you go there and like, if you look at the hashtag on like Instagram, I'm sure it's there. LA sucks for cycling. Like that was always the faux complaint, but then you like check it out and it's like super legit. So he like, of course, documented it and did the reportage on it. And so it was like filmed it like beautiful video and photos. And he had like crazy like cycling celebs out there like Ted King and like just all these folks. Anyway, it's so funny you said that because I was thinking about that. It's a really good scene. I've done a teeny little bit of biking out there. I rode up to the Hollywood sign on that little trail, that path they have. It's super fun and he's done a cool thing with it. If people don't know the Radavis, they should definitely check it out. He definitely has like a bike camping, bike exploring theme.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of Joe a little bit in the universe of like ultra romance, but like a different version of it. I might say the word polished comes to mind, but I don't mean that like in a weird way. Like they're both doing their cool thing. And it's just, they're just like, there are these luminaries in like the universe and the cosmos.
Because he's been around for a while. I mean, I've been familiar with the Radavist and, that it's been popping up for a long, long time. But it's cool to see that those guys be able to, turn it into a living.
Yes, that's the key, because very few people do.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one thing to, it's one thing to take pictures on your rides and have a cool blog and do that, but it's a completely different thing to be able to make a living from it. To turn it into kind of a little empire for himself and be able to live off of that, and like have like a real thing, a thriving business. That's great. That's the hard, it's difficult. That's the hardest thing to do. No, for
sure. That is the hardest thing to do. And I know I say this a lot, but I would really genuinely like to have him on the show. I haven't caught up with him in ages. I would love to have him on. I think it would be great. But you're 100% right. It's super hard. Like, again, you can be a great photographer. You can be knowledgeable about cycling. You could be really into like these Land Rovers, like whatever, like, but to bring it all together, but then to make it a business model, monetize it, to actually make a career out of it and organize it and have like, anyway, so everyone check out the Radavis, and maybe one day we'll have John Watson on, cool dude. But it goes back to this idea, LA actually has some really dope riding. And even like, I'm not comparing them, but, I live in Chicago, we live in Chicago, and we're based in Chicago. So I can't help think of it. But, Chicago has some like cool riding as well. But you have to seek it out. And I think in LA, it's maybe a similar thing. I don't know. I'm not a specialist there, but I think you have to seek it out a little bit. You got to work a little bit. Like you're not living in like Boulder where it's like go any direction. You're probably going to be like having some dope rides, and maybe you don't have to try super hard. I don't know. But we'll see.
Yeah. It'd be nice to do I never considered LA as a bike trip type of place, but it would be pretty interesting to ride some of those trails I've seen. There's a bike shop called Golden Saddle, out in LA. I think I saw on their Instagram that they lost their lease, so they're going to be closing their shop.
Oh no, that's horrible.
Yeah, some sort of closure is happening there. Hopefully they'll bounce back in a different location or something. But it's a shop that I've kind of kept an eye on because they seem to be doing some really cool things and have a vibe going on that I'm kind of into. And oftentimes they've posted things, little rides that they do and things that they do around LA that look really interesting. You just never think of LA that way. And they're probably one of the people that have made me more curious about LA riding and the bike scene out there. So, yeah.
Well, Joe, it could be maybe possibly the first Bike Shop Society team staff trip.
An outing, yeah, that would be nice. It's warm there during the winter, so
let's have a training camp.
Yeah, LA training camp.
In quotes.
Yeah, we have some Korean tacos, and do a food truck tour, all sorts of stuff on the bikes.
Maybe we'll ride bikes, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not.
Maybe some e-bikes.
That's right.
Some scooters.
Yeah. So how are you, Danny? We talked about me. We talked about bike shops. You've been riding a little bit. It looks like you've been riding a little bit.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm okay. I'm all right. Busy with work, but riding a little bit. Not as the tired, overworked answer, of course, is not as much as I'd like. But we had that cold snap, which if Jens Folks were here, he would slap me on the head with a 3-foot salami and said, "It's never too cold for riding." Okay, I went into my Schwarzenegger. accent. By the way, have you ever heard that one comedian? I don't know who it was, but they're like, how come everyone in the world can do a Schwarzenegger accent, but no one can do a Henry Kissinger accent? They're both German. It's just a funny throwaway there. But no, it's been a little cold lately. I've been out riding. I've been doing, I got my nice little single speed. So I've been doing some little lunch rides. I go out for a half hour and what have you. I might grab a coffee and kind of just get out of the house because I work at home like a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my deal. But in terms of riding, last week I got on the bike a little bit and I'm super stoked, Joe. My stoke meter is like at 11 right now out of 10 for this for the coming days. So we're coming out of 30s if you're not in Chicago. So we're coming out of low 30s, mid 30s, high 30s. We're going to 70. We're going to 75 this weekend.
Yeah.
Actually, from now, Joe, to like through Monday, I think something like that, we're looking at like warmer, and it's going to hit up 70, 75, which, depending where you live, that maybe not sound like a big deal. But in Chicago, we have those extremes. We're going from like 32 to 72, and it's going to be like boom, boom, boom. So I'm stoked. I did get out, Joe. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You were busy working in the shop because you're a better man than I am. But I did get out Saturday with someone who's been on the show.
Oh, with our friend Adrian, right, from Cyclesmithy.
That's right.
Former Cyclesmithy employee and
that's right,
new friend
AJ Latrace.
Yeah, very cool.
He's a great guy. So we actually went out for a spin on Saturday, and it was really fun. And he busted out his I believe he has a Specialized.
Okay.
They have it's a little older bike, super cool. It had the word cross in it and like the model name, something cross.
Crossroads,
it was a maybe Crossroads. I thought it was Cross Tech or I don't know what it was, but had like these little like it was kind of it's a cyclocross bike, so it has like these little faux suspension thingies, the Zwerts. What were those things called?
Those Zerts inserts.
The Zerts. Remember the Zerts?
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's a really dope bike and it's in really great shape. So he showed up on that, and we went for a ride. We went southwest. We went to just like southwest for an hour, and then we cut up to not Lincoln Park. We went to Oak Park. Sorry, got my parks mixed up. We went to Oak Park.
Okay.
And we went to a brewery, and that was really fun. We had lunch there, had a beer, and then we rode back to the city. So we had a nice loop, like a 20-mile loop, super chill. And it was that beautiful sunny day, Joe. I don't know if you remember. I don't remember how warm it was, but it was kind of cool to be with AJ, someone, live from the show, who I'd met just recently before with the Cyclesmithy wrap party. Yeah. And we wish you could have been with us, of course. But hopefully before the year ends, we'll all get out for a ride. And it was really fun.
Oh, that's great. That's my evil plan coming together there. People,
nice.
Society members meeting and, you guys doing your thing and getting to know each other. Because, AJ's a really interesting guy. I was fortunate enough to work with him for a little while at Cyclesmithy. And I always found him to be, he's into bikes for one, which helps. But, his outside interests were always were cool too. It was cool too. He's very tapped into things that were going on in the bike scene in Chicago.
So I have to say, when we were at a wrap party for the Cyclesmithy gig, like I'm like standing there with him. I've said a couple words to him, and I'm like, "Hey, great to meet you." And we're making that small talk, and how's it going? Oh, and we knew the Business Insider connection where I worked, and he currently works, and all this. But he mentions like, and he wasn't bragging. It was just like by the by. He's like, "Oh yeah, I was at Riot Fest." I'm like, "Oh, I love Riot Fest. I was there a couple of years ago." Like, I mentioned all these bands I saw, like Blondie and all these cool bands. He's like, "Yeah, I was playing there," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, what'd you just say?" He's like, "Yeah, I was playing." He pulls out his phone, he shows me. It's like on stage jamming guitar.
Yeah,
I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, you actually played Riot Fest? Like I was just like a schmuck in the crowd. Like you played. It was really a fun moment, and I had this realization. So there you go. That's what you get on the Bike Shop Society podcast.
That's right. We'll be bringing in more people like that, I hope, and hopefully he'll be a part of the show a little bit more often. I like to talk to him a little bit because I'm really happy to have reconnected with him, and I think he can add to the show a little bit. So
what a story, what a guy. So I would just give a quick shout out. So the brewery we went to is called Exit Strategy.
Okay.
Exit Strategy Brewing.
That's in Oak Park, Chicago.
I believe. I believe it's
Illinois?
in Oak. Yeah, Oak Park. I believe it's in Oak Park, which is just a little tiny bit west of Chicago here. And they were so cool. I just have to say we're not sponsored by them. I'm not in with them in a collab, if you will. But they were so cool because we showed up. We didn't have our locks, and we had our nice bikes. And the owner came out. She greeted us. She was super cool. And she was like, "We're going to make this work, guys. Like, we don't really want you to bring them into the little restaurant area for various reasons, but let's work this out." She walked us alongside the building through like the little outdoor eating area where these like kind of picnic benches, but it was so cold that day. Like, it wasn't freezing, but it was pretty cold. Like people weren't eating outside. So she's like, "Come through here." And long story short, we ended up parking our bikes next to like where they make the beer, like the actual vats or whatever. Like we're in,
really,
I had a picture on my gram. Like she's like, "Yeah, you can just park the bikes there." We're like, "Thank you so much." And then we had this great meal, and AJ was getting pretty hungry. He was ready for some eating, and it was fun. But they were so great. So that's a cool little brewery, and the beer was actually good. I had a couple of beers there, and that's a good little spot in case people are looking for a place to go. And I just thought they were really, really friendly, and I'm not associated with them, but I thought they were really cool.
No, that's an important thing. We've all been in that situation where we pull up somewhere with our bicycle and you don't have a lock, and someone has to go inside, someone has to stay with the bikes. But but I've also been in that situation where someone will open up a garage or find you a closet somewhere in the establishment to stash your bike for a couple of hours, and how cool that is, just that they go out of their way to do that, because bikes take up a lot of space. I totally understand why you don't want to be bringing bikes into a business. And so it certainly makes that establishment a little more special in my eyes, coming from the bike world, when they do that. So
it was fun. It was just cool to get out. We had a long conversation, a good chat. Of course, we wish you were there. So hopefully before the year is done, Joe, we can get out.
I know I should have. I didn't realize it was going to be in the mid 70s or something.
This may be. I mean, again, this may be the last lovely, warm, sunny weekend of 2022. Maybe.
Do I put up
going fishing?
Gone fishing sign at the bike shop? That's a. That's always the hard part, at this time of the year, because that also means, when it's that warm at this time of the year, they're busy days at the shop, so it's also your last chance to make a few shekels before you gotta, before the cold comes. So it's always, it's a little bit tricky to just abandon the shop, so.
Here's my suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
You put up a sign. First of all, if you know specific people are coming by, like obviously let them know in advance.
Mm-hmm.
But you put up a sign, instead of "gone fishing," you say "gone riding."
Yeah.
And then in parentheses below it, you say, "If emergency, text," and then put your number, and just leave it like that if you can, and just do one of those. I think you deserve it. A little pat on the back to you.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve to do that once a year. Just be a little naughty, play a little truant. Just head out of town, and we'll do a fun ride. You and me, we'll get AJ out, and maybe we'll get Sarah on the e-bike, and whoever else wants to join us.
I will see what I can do. How about that?
All right.
How about
All
that?
right. Fair enough. Joe, do you want a quick news roundup?
Yes. You know what? I was going to mention to you, but since I have you here, I like the news roundup, Danny. I think we should make it a part. I think we should make it a part of the show. I think I
oh
like
my God, like the news roundup corner?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. We'll give it a cooler. We'll brainstorm this week, but yeah,
You're good with you're good with that branding stuff. I'll leave it to you and your creative mind to come up with a cool name. And
I like the news. I like the news corner idea, and I didn't want to like just text you and be like, "Hey, come up with some news stories." So I'm really happy that you brought this up because did. I think you did it last week, and it works out really well. We can kind of bounce some things off of each other, and I don't know what's coming. This is your news corner.
It's just exactly. I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for the feedback. And I'm just kind of cruising like Google News. I'm cruising some of the local sites and just I'm checking out what's going on in my feeds. Last week we talked about a few different things. I think one of the main things was, at least from my perspective, was British Cycling, which is a governing body like USA Cycling of cycling there, and they partnered with Shell, and that got a lot of heat and continues to get a lot of heat for hopefully obvious reasons, but Shell being a fossil fuel based company and, cycling, you can see that contrast and, people being like, hey, can't we do better and partner with other companies instead of taking big oil money and that sort of thing. So that seems to be lingering still, but
still talking about that, huh?
Yeah, I still see, honestly, it's still in my feeds. I still see it going on from like individual folks and news orgs and all that stuff. So moving along, Joe, there are a few things. So we'll start off on a lighter one. So Mark Cavendish, I don't know if we mentioned this last week, but he's been kind of like, he's at the very twilight of his season, and it appears he may be linked to a French team, smaller squad, and he's knocking on that door, the Eddie Merckx record for that 35th stage win. So he basically, if you want to put it in really brutal terms, base terms, he just wants to get to the tour with any team and be able to sprint and win one stage. I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. He wants that. If he gets that, I think he's at 34. He needs 35 to be the all-time Tour de France stage winner to beat Eddie Merckx. So he is linked to this French team, and nothing is official yet, but he is linked to this team, and I've been seeing it in my feeds for 2 weeks ish, and we'll see what happens. Nothing is set yet, but be on the alert for Mark Cavendish signing. That would be really cool. I've had mixed opinions about Mark myself personally, but I do recognize he's probably the greatest sprinter in cycling history, and to see him I think that records should be broken. I think every true champ says that, and I think he should win that 35th stage. I think that would be pretty damn cool. So B&B Hotels is the team I'm talking about, although there's X and there's some others, and to get all his UCI points would be great for a little team. So yeah, fingers crossed Mark gets back to the tour next year and we have that record broken. I think it should be broken. I think Merckx has been on the record saying it should be broken too. Records should be broken.
He kind of does. I'll give you this. He deserves it if he's able to get this whole thing. If he's able to get there and win the stage, he deserves it.
No, for sure. Well said. I mean, there's a whole business side of it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's negotiations, working with his what do you call him? His rep, his agent. Like, there's a whole behind the scenes thing. I mean, clearly no team is under any illusions like taking on Cavendish. Like there's one purpose. That's it. There's just one. That's it. And if he breaks his collarbone, knock on wood, a week before the tour, it's all gone to hell. Like whatever. We're not going for GC. We're not going for stage wins unless it's Mark Cavendish. Like everything's for Cavendish. So I hope he gets it. I hope he gets on there. And heavier news, Joe. We would be remiss if we didn't at least mention it. But as you maybe saw, someone that I think we liked a lot back in the day, who is world famous, Mario Cipollini, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for domestic abuse against his former former partner, his ex-wife, and I believe her boyfriend. So it is unclear if he actually has to serve time or it's going to be suspended, where he wouldn't have to serve it. That was, I don't know, that I just on a personal level, I found it like, I remember hearing stories and allegations in the past, and there was like this long trial, I believe. Just, what to say about it? Just sad and just horrible, and abuse obviously has no place anywhere. And it's just so crazy. He was such a star, right? I mean, he was the star of the sport. Like, well, let's just say it. We have Armstrong. We know he went down in infamy. We had Cipollini. But beyond those two, I really can't think, Joe, of someone who is like that big. Like, we have other great riders, no question. But in terms of like hitting that superstardom status, that's what makes this like a little bit crazier. And I just feel like it's just terrible. And of course, the nature of the story is just
he's probably the last of one of the last of those great stars, that bigger than cycling star, because he was like the model guy, and just the outfits, it all kind of came to an end with him, where some of that just outrageous, the outrageous cycling of the late 90s, those
wild days.
They were pretty kind of wild, it was like for several reasons, for a lot of different reasons now.
Yes.
Now
some good, some not so good. Yeah.
But custom kits and those body painted skin suits that he
the faux skeleton,
wore, the faux skeleton full body suit that he used to wear. I mean, he was such an iconic figure. Cannondale used to have him on all their bike boxes. He was Cannondale's like.
Oh my God! Like I forgot about that.
Yeah, on the side of a Cannondale.
Literally poster boy, like box boy.
Yeah, I was working at a Cannondale cycle smithy. We were a big Cannondale dealer there in those years, and everything was coming. He had Chinelli tape. It was his face and his image on that stuff. So he was bigger than any of the Tour de France winners at that time. He was just a sprinter. And he was huge. So,
we really can't underscore like how big he was. He became like this. The thing was, and you touched on it, like, he had this "what the fuck, I don't care" attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So he would wear the most crazy. He was like a fashionista.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of built like an Adonis. He looks like a model.
Mm-hmm.
He's chiseled, perfect, slick back hair, Italian.
Very Italian. Like stereotypically Italian.
But he wasn't like a schmuck on the bike. He was one of the best cyclists. He won, I think, a world championships road race. He won 80 million trillion stages and all the grand tours. Like he won, he was the rider to beat. But he also had this like wild side where he would just do outrageous things and wear the craziest get-ups and break all the UCI rules, like, and time trials, and wear like, it's crazy. I don't really have any other words, to be honest.
Yeah. There's also that part of cycling where, there's a dark side of cycling where like people, they've been doing research into like the mental side of it. And these guys get very dark, suicides and depression is huge in the cycling world, in the like with former professional cyclists.
I'm sure you and I both can name a bunch of these offhand.
There's
and it's horrible, sad, and depressing, like suicides and mental health issues. And obviously that's come to the forefront in culture in general, in all sports, but in cycling we know about this. And some of my favorite riders, it's tough, man.
It's prevalent in the cycling world, and I there was it kind of comes and goes, because there was talk about it in the press a while ago, and I haven't seen anybody really focus on it lately. But it'd be something really interesting to kind of to revisit. But I remember that there were people kind of studying it too, kind of like like the football players here, having those traumatic brain injuries.
And it's funny as you're talking about that. Like, obviously, it's a super important topic, and the more recent versions I've seen, I think there have been a handful of, like, what springs to mind, like some cyclocross riders. I know who is the Tom Dumoulin. He quit cycling for some time. Was it a year or two? And he was on Jumbo, and he came back, and he's quit. He's resigned, or how should I say? He's retired again, I should say. And he has cited, I think, pressure, and if not mistaken, he talked about mental health, and that has been maybe a little bit more common with folks. And in a way, it's a good sign because they're being very, like, open about it. They're kind of like, hey, I've had these challenges and there's pressure, but it's like a lot of other stuff too. And it's, it's very personal and it's their private thing, and you have to respect that. But yeah, it's very interesting. And, obviously you don't want to see this anywhere. You don't want to see this kind of abuse story in any sport anywhere. But it also has this, you can't talk about it without also just mentioning, like, how this weird kind of social component where the social cultural component where he was so massive. I mean, he was the guy in the sport for years. Years. There's like a weird cognitive dissonance, this weird kind of thing going on when you see someone fall from grace like this. So
yeah, it was shocking to see that. Because it's obviously something that's probably been bubbling in the Italian press for a while, but it was the first time I ever heard of it. I didn't know that was even happening back in Italy. And so when I saw the headline, it was like 3 years in prison for domestic abuse. I was like, whoa,
Yeah, and it's crazy. And, as a footnote, again, it's not clear from the 2 or 3 reports I read whether he actually has to serve that in prison or if it's suspended, meaning they'll just let him, like, not serve it, which is always a weird thing. But it totally is. I definitely heard, and this has been a little bit protracted. Excuse me. I definitely had seen reports of this in recent years, but yeah, heavy stuff. All right, moving on, Joe.
Yep.
To something not heavy,
good, yeah,
but weird,
all right,
weird.
All right.
Did you see the new Specialized Diverge, the new bike that came out? So, I assume embargoed. All the cycling sites posted it this morning. And I don't normally get too excited about tech these days because, my old age, I'm not that fascinated by some of this stuff. But this one's interesting. I don't know if you saw it. So it's the brand new 2023 Specialized Diverge. So we're not even in 2023 yet, and they have the bike out. And it's the STR. So there are a bunch of reviews. You can just Google it. But it has... So it's just like this gravel bike, whatever, but it has this really funky thing that you can adjust, I believe, quickly to adjust the firmness of the seat post. And it's really quirky and weird looking. And I feel like it reminds me of, like, some of those early, like, Paris-Roubaix bikes where they tried to modify them and make them, like, cool for Paris-Roubaix. Yeah. I'm not sure if you're able to see any photos, but it's gotten a lot of, like, weird commentary on my socials.
I see
people
that.
are kind of like, if you like this, unfollow me. Like, just like weird, funny stuff. But that's a really funny looking design. And I was kind of surprised to see Specialized go that way. It seems like kind of a throwback. I don't want to say gimmick, but maybe a gimmicky.
It's a little gadgety
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of gadgety. I don't want to hate on it because I haven't ridden it. It could be amazing. I have no idea. I don't want to have that knee-jerk reaction, but apparently that's a new thing. And I dare say don't read the comments unless you're really into going into the zoo.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny that they just debuted that bike and they had world the World Championships the other day.
I know, it's like they
couple of weeks
missed it.
ago. Yeah, well, and they, you think that they'd have those Peter Sagan on that bike, right? But Peter Sagan was
Yes.
riding like a Roubaix. He was
Yes.
like a slightly modified pair, like a Roubaix, a specialized Roubaix.
Right.
So I mean, and some of the other guys were riding essentially road bikes with a little bit like a 32 tire, kind of your setup, Danny. Those were kind of the bikes that
See, Joe, I'm a world champion.
Yeah, it was your setup. So I mean, I think at least in the gravel racing scene, those bikes are drifting more towards traditional road bikes with clearance for tires than they are towards mountain bikes. At least that's what it looks like. In fact, some of the guy who won the world championship was essentially on a road bike with 32 tires.
Well,
right?
So. Yeah, and Matthew Vanderpoel, I believe, was on a road bike too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I remember reading a review of a regional race. It was Barry Roubaix, I think, up in Michigan. Yeah. I could be wrong. But anyway, the quick story there was the guy who won it, or no, he didn't win. He was in the top 10, but he was a road pro, and he was like not a huge name, but he was a top 10 guy on the road, like finisher in like U.S. road races. He rode that on a road bike, and he just put like 25 mil tires on, or 28 mil tires. Everyone else had these like huge, like elaborate, like gravel racing bikes, and he like crushed it. He's like, you literally didn't need a gravel bike at all. Maybe in like one like 20 meter section, there was like a tad benefit for like not sliding out, but he's like, I just took it a little chill and got right back on. Like, yeah, it was just so funny. I
think it obviously depends on like the course. I mean, there's real gravel courses that will, you're going to need a really big tire, but
you're going to need legit shit for sure.
Yeah, but it was just kind of interesting to see that, that those guys were all on essentially road bikes with big tires. So
Cycling Tips has a pretty deep review at James Wang, and one of the comments there, I haven't done a deep analysis of this by any means, but it talked about one of the mid-range models of the specialized bike, and I think it's $9,000. So someone's like, LOL, 9,000. Don't quote me. I should probably check that. And Joe, just to finish up the little news roundup, I have a nice general mainstream news story for you from CNBC.com.
Okay.
Under their success section of the website, it says the headline reads, "From fly fishing to cycling, the new popular pastimes of the ultra rich."
Ultra rich.
And it leads with an image here of a gentleman who is fly fishing. And it looks very idyllic and beautiful. The lead says, spending time on yachts, golf courses, and the slopes of exclusive ski resorts might be what first comes to mind when thinking about how the ultra rich like to spend their time. And while those are all in the top 10 pastimes of so-called centimillionaires, anyone who has assets worth over 100 million, other activities on the list might be more surprising, Joe. Fishing and cycling are among the ultra-rich's top 10 favorite ways to spend their time, according to new research by wealth management intelligence firm New World Wealth and investment migration consultancy Henley and Partners. Cycling and mountain biking beat skiing to third place, with only golf and art collecting being more popular. Horse riding rounds out the top 5, followed by finishing in 6th place ahead of classic car collecting, hunting, yachting, and watch collecting. I can't believe I'm reading this. And it might be hard to imagine the same people who spend their time buying vintage cars priced as high as $40 million for a Ferrari 250 GTO from the 1960s, standing in a river waiting for fish to bite, or hurtling down mountain biking trails. But the activities have soared in popularity. Back in 2000, both cycling and fishing were much lower on the list, ranking 7th and 10th respectively. Blah, 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 blah. I won't go on, but if folks wanted to read it, apparently, Joe, this is a thing. And I just think that it's really funny that it's up there with all these other weird, fancy car collecting and watch collecting. And
Well, I think
cycling. There you go, Joe. Like
See?
you're in the hot, ultra rich industry.
Specialized must be reading these articles and doing the research because that's why they got these $9,000 bikes. They're getting ready for these ultra rich dudes because I gotta figure out where they live, Danny. Start sending out some postcards, reaching out to these.
Oh my God!
Reaching out to these.
If you go to Google right now, Joe, and if you Google cycling is the new golf, what's the first result you see? The first actual result. Do you see one there from Business Insider?
Ah, yes, I do. Whoa. Back from
so I wrote about this in 20.
Yeah.
I wrote about this in 2015 when I rode with Max Lebchin in San Francisco. He was one of the PayPal mafia, and I don't know if you know the company Affirm, but it's a buy now pay later.
Yeah.
So he started that. It's his current company, and he's done all this other shit. He's amazing. But I got really lucky, and I got to ride bikes with him. But one of the things he talked about was like, he's like, I'm like, oh, so what do you do for your pastime? That was kind of the theme of our interview, I guess. And he's like super into cycling, and I knew that going in. But he, one of the things he talked about was like property. It used to be cool. Like, look where I live. Like people would show off. Like, look at my car. Look where I live. And he's like, this is 2015, so this is 7 years ago. He was saying like, he didn't put it in these words, but he basically talked about how now it's kind of cool to be like, look how far I rode, or look at the watts I did up this climb, or look at the time I did this climb in, like fitness stats.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. So he talked about it, and he's like, oh, I don't play golf. He's like, I have no idea. He's like, I couldn't play golf if you paid me.
I've heard people talk about like their sleep scores these days. Like people are like rating their sleeps, because they're watching. That was an actual conversation that I heard recently, and they were talking about because they're wearing one of these they're wearing the monitors, the 24-hour monitors, and they were talking about their sleep, like their rating or their ranking on their sleep thing. That happened in the bike shop recently. Because oh
my God,
yeah, and I was like, wow,
it's so funny.
This is a whole different thing now. So
yeah, and it kind of, if you think about it, this whole idea on like self-care and like emphasis now on like pandemic, working from home, but like dealing with mental health and like sleeping better, and just the list goes on. It was just so funny. So I was not probably the first, of course, to get on that. But back in 2015, I was writing about that. And it's so funny how mainstream still has articles today like, look what the rich are doing. Fly fishing and cycling, Joe.
Although, Danny, it doesn't seem that foreign to me because it seems like I was there when I was 19 years old. We were talking and thinking about all this stuff back when we were kids because we were into bicycle racing and we were reading Eddie B's complete book of cycling, and he tell you how
to eat fast animals, right? If you eat a fast animal,
zebras and stuff, and like he wanted you to like eat like as many different kinds of meats and things.
We have so many of those in Oak Lawn and Chicago.
I remember there was like some wild meat store out in Lamont.
Can I go to the Dominic's and buy some zebra?
Yeah, and it was actually a place. There was a place in suburban Chicago in Lamont, not too far from the bike shop, not too far from where the bike shop is, that sold like wild meats. They were on Archer. That place, they like exotic meats, but it was like an exotic meat store,
like game
and things. And they ended up in jail. Like they ended up like somebody raided them because they had some illegal stuff that they were selling, like some illegally caught. I don't know if they had alligator or something, but they were selling like odd animals like that. And I remember stopping there on a ride because Eddie B said I had to eat, try to eat like weird stuff.
I think I have his book. I got it waterlogged accidentally, but I have his original book.
Yeah.
And it's like this oversized book. But I thought he mentioned like hare and like rabbit and like these like fast animals. And that was like one of the things when he passed away a couple of years ago, I think it was. I remember a lot of people like, writing stuff about him on socials and stuff. And one of the one of the dominant things is like, yeah, eat fast animals, you'll be fast.
Yeah.
Which, was like, I'm like scratching my head. I'm like, wow, it sounds like kind of like old folklore, like, but maybe it's true. I don't know. Maybe I should eat some rabbit. I don't know. I ate rabbit in France when I lived there, but and the tour riders actually eat rabbit.
Yeah, and horse. Horse was
because it's so freaking lean.
Yeah, when I first moved to Europe, the horse was still kind of fairly, I wouldn't say super common, but I had a couple of friends who would, bring me a horse sandwich every once in a while.
Alberto Betzial, who won the Tour of Flanders, when I was at the tour one year, so he was on the team that was racing the tour, and I got to talk to him a little bit, and I saw him a couple of times with like this thing this encased meat. It looked like salami or something, like a giant salami. And I learned later it was actually horse.
It was horse.
And I was, I had never had it. And I was like, ooh, what the hell's that? And then I'm like doing the Google Translate with Italian stuff. I'm like, oh, I think this is horse meat. Turns out that's one of his little favorites. And the chefs had it on hand. And he would have just a little bit of it here and there.
Yeah.
It was just something he really liked. I was a little bit like, what? And then I realized actually it's not that crazy to have that like in Italy and some European countries. So I mean, he won the Tour of Flanders, so maybe I should start eating.
Maybe we should go on a hunt.
There are a lot of horses out in the southwest suburbs. There are a lot of stables.